Buongiorno a tutti, è con grande piacere che vi presento il professor Metin Bosnak. I'll switch to English now. He's visiting professor from the Zaim University in Istanbul, Turkey. He holds an MA in comparative studies and a PhD in American studies. I'm saying this because he has published books, essays, in these two fields. So he has these two souls, let's say, English studies and American studies. And I must say that's the school I come from as well. So thank you for being here for another reason. He has been a visiting professor in USA. He has taught in different universities in both Bosnia and in Turkey. He has a long list of publications. I'm just going to quote the most recent. He has the other things you can see online, but he will be working with us in these two days. He will be working with us with some of these themes, so I want to quote his publications. T.S. Eliot and the Poetics of Politics, Archetypal and Feminist Approaches to American Literature, Poetics of Love, they're all 2021, so very recent. He is also the author of a collection of poetry, Behind My Shadow, published in 1987. We will ask him to read one of his poems in these 2 days. Okay, that's the part I'm most interested in because I couldn't find it. So, please, it's a real pleasure to have you here in the Erasmus program. I want to thank my colleagues who have organized. You're not coming to Benevento. That is Paolo Palumbo and Federico De Andres, who are in charge of the Erasmus program. But as I said at the very beginning, it's all right for this time. At least we see you, and we thank you very much for agreeing to give the lessons anyway. Let's say it's our first contact, visually contact, waiting to have you in person in Benevento, where we can welcome you as we should. So today he's going to speak of T.S. Eliot. We'll go to other fields afterwards. At 12 o'clock, he will be speaking of dystopia in American cinema. And on Wednesday, we have three different lessons on women in literature and culture. Today, as I said, he's going to speak of T.S. Eliot and Western civilization. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Please accept my apologies once again because I couldn't make it for reasons beyond my control. But I am very pleased and honored actually to be with you guys. And I already feel the homily ambience at your university through the faces before even contacting you in person. And thank you very much for that. And you know, I am from Turkey, and Turkey, the old name given to Istanbul is Constantinople, the other part of the Roman Empire. So we share that heritage as well. So the Italian peninsula also had like interactions with other cultures. And I remember the Roman senators waking up sometimes and say, burn Carthage, because Carthage represented this like ongoing Oedipus image probably. And that has like carried on throughout centuries. And of course, like when you talk about civilization, Western civilization, the Roman heritage is, of course, a massive one, a profound one. So the topic I'm gonna sort of explore with you guys Western civilization and how Elliot actually looks at Western civilization. But then again, because this is a scholarly conversation, as I like take it to be, I want to like ask you like questions first about like how we like look at Western civilization, or how do we really define the West above all? I mean, sometimes words being overused lose their meanings. Therefore, to refresh our memories, shall we maybe begin with our like students, how they understand the West to be? Like, what does the West mean to them? Can they participate? Can the students participate? Probably not. Oh, okay. My question is going to be like, if you guys hear me well, like, what do we mean by the West? Like, what do we understand from the West, the concept? Probably it won't be working that way, but let me sort of lay down the foundations of our talk here. Like when we talk about Western civilization, what we mean is like the four fountainheads of cultural heritage, you know.
Good morning, it's Professor De Andres. Sorry for interrupting you. Just we have an issue with the audio. So just, if you can wait just 1 second because we have fixed the audio. Okay, so just 1 second.
Okay. Okay.
Even if we are like on distance. But thank you very much because we have students
here
online as well. So just we are trying to fix this issue with the audio.
Right. Hi there. Nice to see you guys.
But anyway, thank you very much for your commitment anyway to join us, even if it was not possible you made to do online.
Hey, we'll make it someday. Yeah, thank you.
Just 1 second, and I give you the floor. We are fixing the audio, and I give you back the word. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll wait.
Federico. Sono qua.
Però Ferco, mi scusi che stavamo risolvendo un problema di audio.
Lo so, speravo che qualcuno intervenisse.
Quindi ho bloccato un attimo tutto, ma
fatto bene.
Abbiamo capacità di problem solving invidiabili, non sarà? Adesso risolviamo anche questo.
Va bene.
Metin, anyway, we have so many students here present that it's quite bizarre actually, because we are still like in the pandemic issue, and also we have other students connected, and so pleased to have so many students interested in your topics these days.
Okay, I'm very thankful to all of them. Because this topic sometimes is boring for the people, so I'm very like pleased to know that.
So you can go ahead, Metin. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. So I want to ask a question first, like before we dive into the topic. Like, what do we mean by the West or the Western? Like, how do we define the West? Like, what are the boundaries? If like our dear students can respond to that question, I'll be pleased, or else I'll move on. If it doesn't work that way. Probably not. Okay. Okay.
They are coming. The microphone is far from the seats, from the chair, so they need to move that to answer to you. So just wait a sec, okay?
Okay, okay.
Maybe they can write the answer on the chat and we can read it.
Yeah, that would work.
So, anybody? An answer?
Yes, they are a bit shy, but we are trying to encourage them to take part. Yeah. So,
Okay.
anybody? If you prefer writing the answer in the chat, you can do that. Come here, please.
Okay, we're going to have.
Don't be shy, nobody's going to see you. I mean,
I'm sorry for the trouble.
Yes, we have a student who would like to answer.
Okay.
What's the box? Hi.
Hi there.
Yeah.
I think we mean the American and European culture specifically.
Okay, American and European culture. So that's what the West means, huh? Okay. So these are like only two parts of what we call the Western culture, as you know. Like when we talk about the West or Western civilization, we essentially talk about two fountainheads, essentially, right? The Judeo-Christian and Greco-Roman. So you're supposed to be proud of being one of the fountainheads of that culture. Of course, a lot in the Roman culture depended on the Greek models. So one is supposed to be the secular side of Western culture, or some say paganic origins. I believe they did believe in gods in a way that is probably different from the way we believe in God, but they did still have a concept of God. And the others are like the Judeo-Christian, and that's supposed to be the religious origins of Western civilization. But like when you map it up geographically, which was the case until the 19th century, you're talking about some like interesting points here, because if you're talking about Western civilization, remember the founder of Judaism or the founders of Judaism were all born in where? In the Middle East. They're Eastern. Right? Moses was in the East, right? And Adam and Eve were born, or like they were thrown into some area in the Middle East, in what is now Syria, Iraq, and partly Turkey. So paradise is supposed to be situated in that region. And talking about Christianity, where was Jesus born? Jesus was born in the Middle East again. So the point I'm trying to make is like what you call the Western is like Eastern at the same time, geographically speaking. All right. And talking about the Greeks, you know, where I live now, the Greeks were living, and some of them are still living here in Turkey. They called this land Anatolia, which meant where the sun rises. So it is the east. So this is supposed to be the east. But then again, talking about the east again defines where you where you situate yourself or locate yourself. When the definitions of the East and West came out, it was during essentially the Roman times, because Rome was at the center of the universe, according to that understanding. So people did talk about the west of Rome and the east of Rome, okay, and north and west. So it did not actually refer to a cultural delineation. It referred to a geographical location. So when the Greeks called Turkey of today as Anatolia, they did refer to that understanding again, because they thought, you know, this is where the sun rises, so it is supposed to be the east. The point I am trying to make it, and you can interrupt me anytime, by the way. I love interruptions, so there is no bother about it. The point I am trying to make is we in modern times go with a lot of identifications, but like philosophically speaking, those identifications do not necessarily work. So Jesus is born, it was born in the Middle East. Moses was a Middle Eastern figure. Roman Empire extended far into and actually beyond the Middle Eastern territories. So you're talking about a melange of all these cultures in history. But then again, when you come to the 19th century, there is a consciousness that develops at the time. And this consciousness actually works against the traditional understanding of the cultures as well. What I mean by that is actually the tradition that Eliot talks about has a reversal of fortune. Because in the 19th century, the geographical indicators, east and west, turn into cultural geographies. So the west now implies something more than the eastern like section of the universe or where we are sitting. It now refers to a totality, and that totality is like a lump sum togetherness of a lot of things. And let's remember, these like Fountain has a Western culture do not necessarily live happily with each other. Like talking about the Roman heritage, the old historical accusations against the Jews, for instance, because they killed or helped kill Jesus Christ on the cross. And the accusations again made within the Fountain has a Western culture are still determining parts of our attitudes towards life, interestingly. What I mean is, like, Jesus dies on the cross, and some Christians today still accuse the Jews or the Romans of being like theocides, like God killers. So these meta-narratives continue to affect our lives, so though they have like conflicting points within themselves, the totality of the West is constituted by these like fountainheads, Judeo-Christian and Greco-Roman. In the 19th century, there is this reversal of cultural understanding in many ways, because let's remember some of the changes in the 19th century. I'm sorry, the consciousness changing, the consciousness like beginning with, say, Marx, is now based on class distinctions. It does not any longer actually feel integrated with that totality that we call the West. And also Darwinian understanding of like species, origins of species also turns upside down a lot of traditional belief systems, because Darwin believes that, you know, if you are not created by God or Dio or Yahweh or Allah or whatever, depending on which culture you're coming from, they just evolved out of apes. And of course, this undermines the great chain of being. So when you undermine that, there is something also happens. With God gone, now you're letting people, probably as Newton would put it as well, you're letting people like take care of their job. Since God is not taking care of their job, or God is not giving an order to the universe. So with Darwin, we still seem to be like conscious or semi-conscious animals in that sense. Then towards the end of the century, there happens something else. This time, the Freudian understanding of human psychology, and his definition that we are mostly unconscious. It is our unconscious desires that determine our lives. So human society, Western society in general, has gone through a lot of transformation, and this happened within a short span of time. I don't know whether like I am being clear, or I should kind of elaborate upon some of these things before I move on to Eliot's poetry. Any questions or like comments so far? Any questions or comments? Okay.
I think you can go on. It was
Okay.
quite
Yes,
clear.
Okay.
yes, you can go on. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So when we talk about Eliot considers the Western civilization as a totality, though he takes apart due to his like anti-Semitic attitudes the Judaic tradition, and not necessarily identifying what he's gonna do without that heritage. Because remember, like when you talk about Christianity, and Eliot is quite a Christian, quite a like firm believer of Christianity, and he calls himself a classicist in literature, and royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. And he even like gave up on his American citizenship because there is not much written about in America. There's not much to write about in America. So he leaves America and then takes British citizenship later on in the 1920s. And he does not like this American thing, you know, in his heritage. Though today scholars of Eliot would argue that Eliot is still an American guy, because he talks about coffee spoons in his like the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, whereas the Brits would love to talk about their tea. Remember, imported from India. Okay. So Americans love coffee, the Brits love tea. So when Eliot says like, I measured my life with coffee spoons, he proves that he's American. But then when he wrote that poem, he still was like dangling between the two cultures. So they seem to be forgetting about that. So why does he kind of embrace Anglo-Catholicism despite this American heritage, American blood, and American Puritanism? Remember, is purely based on hatred of Europe, specifically of Roman heritage, and specifically the Catholic heritage. So Catholicism for centuries in American tradition has been characterized either in relation to the demonization, or some like oldishness, or corruption, and all that stuff. So we are talking about times when politics go hand in hand with religion, and transformation of societies happens through a yoking together of these traditions. And Protestantism essentially presented these views, and American Puritans followed this pattern of thought. So Catholicism, or the papal authority, was some kind of demonic entity they should fight against, and they're now going back to the original scriptures, and they don't need any priest to interpret the Bible for them and all that stuff. So you can understand that enthusiasm, the revolutionary enthusiasm and all that stuff, but somehow, like, history plays a certain role in human societies when a leading group of people sort of dominate the general ambience, and the other people follow. So the whole heritage of Catholic Christianity has been sort of put aside. The architecture, the beautiful architecture of Catholic tradition has been put aside, and icons were put aside because they were like signs of idolatry. So a new tradition has begun, and this in the 16th century has created in European societies a great schism. And in his work, Knows Towards the Definition of Culture, Eliot talks about these schisms with bitterness. Eliot is worried that the so-called Western civilization should have stayed as a totality, not as fractures. But then again, the thing that he talks about in his tradition and individual talent, like in terms of what he means by tradition, he means an integrated pattern of all these, like Fountain has a Western culture that should, according to Eliot, survive and actually dominate the 20th century. And when he sees that, you know, that totality is lost, that integrity is lost, and you're talking about a time when Europe has been sort of demolished due to war, and then all these expectations people have cherished in the 19th century about a better society, about a happier society, like with machines helping us do our jobs, and we humans like having more time to develop ourselves somehow fall through. So when Eliot in his the Wasteland talks about London Bridge falling down, he is also talking about Western civilization sort of falling down. So in the second part of this lecture, I want to explore some concepts and then focus on the Wasteland, where Eliot is very critical of Western civilization as it was then. So Eliot is supposed to be in favor of impersonal theory of poetry. You know, poets, as Plato would put it, are good liars. They are liars, but then again, they are skilled liars. They know how to hide their lies. So Eliot, when he talks about impersonal theory of poetry, he does mean to say something about the cultural legacy of the West. But then again, you know, by impersonating aspects of Western civilization in his poetry, he also effaces himself behind certain figures in his poetry. So I personally believe when Eliot talks about impersonal poetry, he's actually trying to repulse the criticism directed against him when he was writing, like especially this weird kind of poetry, weird in the sense some people understood at that time. Therefore, like he is kind of using this theory to shield himself off against these critiques of his poetry, and therefore he wants to create a cocoon in which he can, yes, like with patience and with melange, if you will, of moments in history, he's going to create a poetry which unites the Western historical moments and rolling them up into a Western totality. But then again, the problem still remains when he concludes the poem, the Wasteland, with passages from Hindu philosophy. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. We'll talk about that. Okay. So such a like Western-oriented guy, such a sort of like conservative guy, a classicist in literature, ending his poem with like clues from or with hopes based on Hindu philosophy would mean a lot of things. We'll talk about that later on. Just bear with me for a while. But if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. I'm trying to squeeze into these like moments as many things as possible. Maybe I am doing wrong, but you know, please bear with me. So tradition, most people understand as like oldish things. So when you go to like museums, people visit those like they would visit zoos. So there is elements of the past in museums. People do look at them, enjoy seeing them, but they don't necessarily expect anything from them because they don't actually add up to their liveliness. They don't add up to their, you know, present moment. This is the common understanding. So what Elite says, however, is actually just the opposite. Elite says, you don't inherit the tradition, you acquire it. How do you acquire it? By working on the tradition and the traditional patterns of thoughts and literature and all that. So his understanding of tradition is like the presence of the past and the pastness of the present at the same time. So the present is actually a different form of the past, according to Eliot, because it kind of adds up to the present, and it finds itself into the present, forming up, being constituted by, and constituting the present state of affairs. So this is the tradition. So the tradition in that sense is a living entity. It is not that. It is not. You're not talking about mummification of historical heritage. You're talking about a history as a living entity. Oh, how does that happen? Like if you're a writer, a poet, say, a good writer, according to Eliot, should appropriate. You know, if you plagiarize, your professors would probably punish you for that. But you know, Eliot is in favor of plagiarism, but with no traces of your plagiarism. Earlier on, Shakespeare did this. Remember, like he puts together usually two works from the Roman or the Greek era, and then makes them into one play. So we call this a Shakespearean play. So Shakespeare is like one of the greatest plagiarists in history of literature. But we praise him to the skies But when you guys do that, we accuse you of plagiarism. So Eliot's tradition is a living entity, and the tradition is supposed to be supported by and enjoyed by the individual who has the talent to write poetry. So you go to the Homeric works, you read them, you study them, and then you come to the, say, the Roman era, you read like Horace, Ars Poetica, and then understand what poetry is about, how you should write poetry, or like read Cicero, if you will. And then coupled with that, you also add up the Middle Ages, though there is, most people claim, not much written in the Middle Ages. And I personally disagree with the so-called Dark Ages idea, because there was a lot of things going on. And the Dark Ages was not necessarily a period of darkness. So when you look at the Dark Ages, you also like preserve some of the biases against those like centuries, because our perspective of the past is often determined by the way we look at that past from a present perspective. So the darkness case is like put forward by the ideas of the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment ideas would look at those ideas developed in the Middle Ages as dark, simply because they were not parts of the Enlightenment philosophy. And talking about the light, of course, you can talk about, like, in terms of God's light, or in the case of Lucifer, the light bringer. You can talk about like the light that the devil can sort of light up in your mind, and you can talk about light in other terms as well. So embracing a religion according to some traditions would also mean that you're finding the light. So Eliot considers all this tradition as a totality, and then concludes that, if you as a poet want to write good things, you have to base your poetry on the tradition. And when we talk about like basing your poetry on the tradition, we mean to say that you are going to appropriate it, like embezzle, sort of make your own, because you have changed the content, the essence of that heritage to such an extent that no one recognizes that actually you have plagiarized from those works, so to say. So it is now yours, and it is now a new project. In other words, like thinking about the Nile, the river in Egypt. It merges with the Mediterranean, as you know. The Mediterranean is, say, the tradition. So the individual talent is like the Nile, the river. So until that river submerges in the Mediterranean, it is individual. But then again, when the collocation of these waters, the Mediterranean and the Nile, occurs, then you are no longer that individual, because you have become part of the tradition. This is how Eliot looks at the tradition and the individual talent. So if you have no questions or like comments, I'm gonna move on with Eliot's understanding of or like portrayal of the West, the Western civilization in the wastelands.
Any questions or comments? I've got a question, if I may.
Yes, please.
To encourage students to do the same. So you were talking about this, passage phase in the 19th century, where the boundaries between Eastern and Western societies and cultural elements were clear. There was no clear-cut, borderlines between the two. So the high level of intertextuality and the commission of tones and the plural languages, because, you mentioned the Sanskrit word, shanti, at the very end of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Can it be interpreted as a way to convey this sense of commission of elements coming from both cultures and this passage phase, from a historical point of view?
I couldn't get the last part of the question very well.
The last part of question? Yeah,
yes.
The commission, sorry for the, the mask.
Yeah, I understand.
I have to wear it because we are a lot of people here. The commission of tones, the high level of multilingualism that we can find in the wasteland. So
yes.
You mentioned, for example, the Sanskrit word shanti at the very end of the poem. So which means peace that goes beyond, the limits of human understanding, and also the intertextuality. So
yes.
mentions, implicit or explicit mentions, a reference to texts coming from both cultures, the Eastern cultures and Western cultures. Can it be interpreted, in your opinion, I don't know, as a way to convey, represent this absence of clear-cut points between Eastern society and Western societies in this very important, crucial, historical period of passage?
Thank you very much. I think I got the question now. Of course, like the linguistic variety, algorithms, if you will, to use a modern concept, algorithms in Eliot's poetry strives to create an integrated view of the West. So, like in the case of the Wasteland, for instance, I mean, he starts with a quotation from a Latinate language, and then he has characters speak in German, like talking about like ich bin Russin, nicht Deutsch, those expressions, and then he has like a linguistic portrayals of the West, but then again there is not any American guy in the process, so he leaves that aside, that part, because you cannot expect anything from Americans, according to Eliot. I am kind of like simplifying the case, but that's what he means, like through and through in his writings. And the reason why he chooses to embrace Anglo-Catholicism and English citizenship is because he says he believes that there is no culture in America. There is no culture in America, and other expatriates living in England are actually thinking along the same lines, like Ezra Pound, the mentor, so to say, of Eliot's poetry. Remember, also other writers, when they have hated all these centuries, some European values, like including Italian here, they want to concur with the European civilization because there is not much back in the frontier, in the American frontier. So they develop an understanding of the American frontier as an essential element. I'm talking about Turner's thesis, the frontier thesis. The romantic American romantic historians would love to create a culture, so they develop theories, including the melting pot theory. But then again, that melting pot does not allow you to keep the essence of what you are, and that is like in social life, creating sometimes hyphenated identities, but it is not necessarily representative. So when you talk about the melting pot, that melting pot wants to include you in the pot as long as you have like melted away, in essence. So that culture does not produce itself, thinking about the time. So in Henry James's works, for instance, Daisy Miller, Daisy comes to visit the Roman Colosseum, for instance, and she looks at the Colosseum. Oh my God, what is this? This is, I'm sorry to use the expression, this is a bullshit building. I mean, this is so old. So the writer is making fun of those things, and the intellectuals, writers of America were like very well aware of what the US was lacking at that time. Though they built up upon European hatred those centuries of vacuum of culture. So elite is yes, trying to incorporate into the West a lot of elements, cultural, religious, linguistic, and all that. But then again, he doesn't seem to be including elements from America, nor the Irish actually, because like as far as the Irish are concerned, Eliot is very much like representative of official politics of England. So Irish people are like Swedes. I mean, their root. They only follow their like it's. So there's no reasoning, no culture about them, and all that stuff. And let's remember, actually, I was intending to talk about that later on. He presents you throughout the poem with a lot of situations. And in those situations, especially situations related to women. Yeah. And Eliot, I believe, is a gynophobic in this sense. And he presents in those elements where like there is like lack of communication all the time. I mean, you may be rich, but you're not happy. You are married, but there is no kids. I mean, you live on the mountains at times, and you like if you want to go south in winter, you can't do that. But still, again, there is nothing of like a connecting sentiment. So Eliot is presenting you with all these scenes from the then present situations of Europe. Of course, Europe has gone shambles. And partly, I believe, though he presents this as a cultural phenomenon, I believe this is like the personal matters projected as universally Western problems at times. Like talking about the couples and like hatred of women most of the time. And remember, like even in the earlier poem, which is actually a beautiful poem, like he is talking about like let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go. So you feel like this is an address, like in a Shakespearean or Petrarchan sonnet to a lady. But then again, this is not what you like find in the poem. So your expectations is not like met by the flow of the poetry, because this time he is going to refer you to Hamlet, and he's going to talk about women who are so pretentious, who come in and go, talking of Michelangelo, for instance. They don't understand anything from portraits, from painting, all that stuff. But then again, they pretend to be in the know, that they mean something. Or again, like talking about Hamlet, shall I act? Shall I act, or shall I like wait again? So we see Eliot presenting that situation as objective correlative, but that objective correlative actually has his address in Eliot, not necessarily in Western society. But elite knows very well how to hide those emotions or project them as universal as far as the Western context is concerned. I don't know whether I'm making myself clear.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
If there are any other questions from here, from the online attendees? Anybody? Okay, I think you can go on. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. So if there is his portray as a Western phenomenon. So elite does that. Elite does that. He knows how to cosmeticize, how to politicize his own like personal problems, and however, like talks about how those emotions all the time. And like philosophically speaking, like being impersonal is impossible. You can be part of a culture, but being impersonal is not possible. Being objective is not possible. I mean, several philosophers we can refer to define what we mean here. And actually, there is nothing wrong with being subjective. Actually, being subjective requires a lot more stamina and responsibility. Like being objective, sometimes scholars love to talk about objectivity, journalists talk about objectivity, politicians talk about objectivity. What they often mean is, don't criticize me, you cannot criticize me. This is scientifically proven or scientifically objective viewpoint. I'm being objective, so you cannot criticize me. You don't criticize me. That's kind of the attitude. But being subjective is a better way of expressing things. You can talk about intersubjectivities, of course, like when you kind of codify yourself as the sole source of the truth, then you're deifying yourself in a sense. But like we can talk about intersubjectivities. Ibn Arabi in the Andalusian tradition talks about that. Ibn Arabi talks about that, for instance. He talks about different viewpoints gathered together, shedding light on the same thing from different perspectives. And remember again, difference, the concept that Derrida introduces, includes that idea, like you're differing and differing at the same time. And this refers to a constant bounce off the center. So each time you are linked up with the center, but then again move away from the center to define something new and to create a new meaning. Otherwise, we would be reading the texts for centuries in the same way. Maybe what we can criticize in the Middle Ages was that problem. Like you have notes taken like annotations, but annotations more or less follow the same patterns, out of fear of like excommunication or like criticism at times. But truth is always up there, but that up is always beyond us. Yes. Am I being boring? Am I being boring?
Oh, absolutely not. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Reading Eliot is actually like reading an encyclopedia of history at times. So I mean, the poem itself is digressive. It is about digression. So it is natural that you need to kind of digress at times, because the poem itself is a melange, a collage of like Western totality, the way Eliot chooses, picks up, and then kind of molds into a certain pattern. That's why I'm sorry if there is any kind of misunderstanding. If you have no questions or comments, I'll proceed, not with everything about the poem, but the last part of the poem.
Sorry, before going before
Yeah.
going to the last part of the poem, maybe
Yeah.
we could, as you spoke of, Western civilization being all set in this poem as a melange and so on, maybe it is interesting for the students, we know these things, for the students, why has the poem been cut so much? What if we had the original version of the poem? Would it be even more total? Or as you were suggesting, the poet needs to restrict and tell at the same time. Maybe this, this point would be of interest for the students, even if we give it for granted.
Yeah. As you know, the original poem was actually about 1,000 lines. So Ezra Pound has kind of reduced it to less than 500, and it is in 5 parts. I believe in the present shape, it is like more complicated, and probably that's what Ezra Pound wanted, like intended it to be. So in the first the or text, in the or text, you have like other things, and I personally have hunted down the sources myself, like many critics of Eliot's poetry have done. And when you read his poems with the endnotes, I mean, of course, it is ridiculous to read endnotes in a poem, but then again, Eliot has like provided those endnotes in his poetry to clarify certain things. But then again, Eliot is a slippery person. I mean, slippery in the sense that he says, I have put those notes to clarify for you guys to understand the poem. These are the sources like Weston's book, and like the Golden Bough again, and many other works, like the work that he referred, like quoted, like both personal, because he wants to prove that he's a poet from America. And remember, at that time, if you do not like get authorized by the British audience, you mean nothing. Good at fashion. If you want to make a name in fashion, you go to Milano, right? Or Paris. So if you want to produce a fragrance, then you have to be somehow linked up with some like Parisian company. So that's the censorship. I mean, Eliot and other guys like Pound actually feel that burden that the American culture has not sort of cherished and even hated, hated sophistication, I mean. So when they come to Europe, even today, suppose they go to Greece, I've seen American tourists, for instance, looking at those like like historical sites, architectural masterpieces, and yeah, I mean, it looks like something, but then they're very old things. These are very old things. I don't know why they don't do anything about like rectification or restoration or all those things. And the same thing probably you have witnessed in Italy. I mean, you're talking about cradles of civilization, but the Americans would not make much out of those things. And American culture is supposed to be based on novelty. So they still don't understand. They don't have a sense of history, and they make fun of Western European, essentially Western European societies, because they are so heavily indebted to history. But then again, they have no sense of history, and they don't know how much they are missing, because history also like provides a bulwark or like a mediocrity against which to argue. So they are now doing things in imitatio Europe, so to say. I mean, you buy bridges from England, or like you copy down certain churches or cathedrals and then clone them and reproduce them in America to create this historical consciousness. But does that seem to be working? I mean, you feel that despite all these campuses looking oldish, you understand that it is not old. It is not old. The oldest building is supposed to be like 200 years old, and probably some like firearm like stronghold place where they used to make firearms and all that stuff. But then again, this is what America is about. This is what America is about. So that conflict between Europe, the European and American still goes on, like the conflict between Eastern European and Western European goes on. So talking about the West again, I mean, who represents the West today? Italy, France, England, who had Brexited, as you know, or Greece, or Serbia, recently part of the EU now, or Bosnia and Herzegovina, or Macedonia,
Sure.
Romania. Like, what's the West here? Or Israel? I mean, or like South Africa, or Hong Kong. Because now you're like going beyond the geographical limitations. You're talking about not even culture, but economics, a certain type of understanding that puts you together. So the person in Hong Kong, after a century of British colonization, has bred a generation of people that would connect with the Brits better than with the Chinese in the mainland. Or New Zealanders spoken. New Zealanders, are they Western, or which one is like more Western than say Italy, say? Okay, so I mean, of course, like our knowledge is mostly overgeneralized. I mean, we talk in overgeneralized terms. This is essentially the problem, and probably we need to overgeneralize all these acts and everything, because we cannot communicate otherwise. But like when you like deeply analyze all these like long, hard-chewed facts, we feel that they like they are not really working. I mean, you can construct any truth or value that has evolved in history, I believe. Okay. All right. Shall I move on, or maybe do you guys need a break or something? Are you okay?
I think that we can go on and then end before, so that the students can can rest before the next lesson. We'll have the break afterwards. So at a certain time, you can stop, and then we'll get back at 12 o'clock.
Yeah. All right. So Eliot's The Wasteland describes the waste in Eliot's like sexual and personal matters to a great extent. And Eliot, however, knows how to project all that onto a Western geography, topos, yes, topos, and at the same time, history. It is not just the topos as present then. Like he visits to express these phenomena he visits all these like historical moments, historical personages, and we know that he refers to this as like objective correlative, a certain emotion expressed through a reference to a figure or historical moment. It is a beautiful concept that he develops, and of course, like when he develops that, he also like verges on Jungian understanding of collective unconscious at some point, and like there's a lot of other influences on him, and we don't have time to go through that. Like he refers to Blake, and Blake's London is no different from Eliot's The Wastelands. Or like he refers to the French culture, talking about the French poets, and you know, Eliot is very much under the influence of the French poets. And interestingly, he does not like very distinctively talk about those influences, but you know, you can clearly see that. I am like more interested in the last part of the poem, and actually I have written about these things, but I'm gonna be like focusing on the last part in order to clarify a problem. I don't know whether we could call it a problem or an issue here. The last part introduces us to an aspect of culture. You might call it Western if you consider this like consider that, you know, the Sanskrit language is Indo-European, and during the Orientalism of the 19th century, you know, the West had another shocking experience. You know, while trying to build up, you know, a Western, purely Western heritage, you know, Western intellectuals, including anthropologists, archaeologists, and all that, noticed something. The origin, or the thing that they called the origin was not the origin. There were cultures that went beyond the original cultures that they were cherishing, including the Greek and of course the Roman culture. After all, talking about culture and civilization, you cannot like single-handed to talk about a single certain culture. The Indians, today's Indians, as far as I have studied, actually emerges in the Middle East, yes, and then they go through today's Iran to the Hindu geography today, and they develop their ideas. And you know, if you think, you know, the Hindu civilization as part of not through colonization, but historically speaking, if Hindu civilization is part of the West because they are coming out of their languages Indo-European again, then you should consider the Iranians, the Persians, as European too, because their language is Indo-European. So there is more to cultural definitions that the language affinities actually reveal. So there is so many things to discuss, of course, like, but I don't want to be like too boring. Then I'll not have any audience for the next session. That's why I'm kind of scared of it. So throughout these four parts or chapters of this poetry, the wasteland, you're giving scenes not from a disco you might enjoy overnight, of course, after or before COVID, but like scenes of disaster. Let me read some, if you will. Here is no water. Here is no water, but only rock. Rock and no water, and the center road. The road winding above among the mountains, which are the mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst rock, one cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry and feet are in the sand if there were only water among the rock. That mountain, mouth of curious teeth, so he's personalizing, that cannot spit. Here one can neither stand nor lie or sit. There is not even in the mountains, but dry thunder without rain. There is not even solitude in the mountains, but red sullen faces sinier and snarl from doors of mud cracked houses. So, I mean, in a dystopian variety, you have all these elements of like hopelessness, of like wreckage, of distortion, of corruption, the way Eliot sees them. And Eliot loves to talk about it. I mean, he is getting almost like sadomasochistic pleasure by talking about similar things in different, geographies or historical moments, or through different personages. But then again, you come down to the same thing. Like, Gary, this is not what I would call civilization. This is all wreckage. This is corruption. And all these people are actually contributing to that. Of course, the Irish, the German, and all that, they are all contributing to the process. And who actually adds up to the present civilization? That answer, it does not ultimately come. That's what I believe. We can argue about that. So the thunder without rain, an important chapter title does I think attest to what I am kind of arguing about earlier. Remember, we see Tiresias running throughout the poem. Tiresias is the narrating persona, or like a dialogical persona, as I called it in my writing. Dialogical because like he kind of relays that info that he has experienced. And let's remember, Tiresias is actually emblem of the two sexes. He has the experience of both sexes, according to mythology. So with that in mind, let's now go to the other like markers in the poem, like when he's referring to Jesus Christ and saying, I cannot see the hanged man. I cannot see the hanged man. So he cannot see Jesus Christ. The hanged man is the crucified man, of course. He cannot see the hanged man. Why does he need to see the hanged man? For a second coming, for redemption again, because as you know, Jesus Christ is supposed to redeem us from the original sin. Otherwise, it is being like genetically transmitted from generation to generation. So the first coming is okay now. But the second coming is still up there. It is not like activated. That process is not activated. So like, I cannot see the hanged man. It refers to a hope or expectation from like his source of inspiration, Christianity or Jesus Christ, to kind of salvage the West from this wreckage of the war, and maybe like unethical or immoral geographies. But then again, he does not come. So thunder without rain is, I think, the most marked representation that the hope that the Westlanders expect will not come from Christianity. Let me read some parts here. Eliot's academic involvement with Indian philosophy and his anthropological sources paves the way for the poet's preference. So it was not simply Eliot, but like James Fraser, who has written this like voluminous work, Golden Bough. And it is really, it's a remarkable work of anthropology. And works written again in the 19th century due to has kind of unearthed, or the West is not like a separate entity. The West is actually connected to a lot of other traditions in the so-called East. So seeing that some scholars, some intellectuals, and politicians too, I might add, in both like Europe and for instance America, like the author of like I'm talking about Washington Irving, who comes study in Europe, for instance, the classical heritage, as well as like going to Spain and discovering Andalusia, this civilization there in Spain and Portugal and other places, or like going to India through colonialism and discovering in India things that tradition actually brought a shock to Western sort of scholarship, because the understanding they wanted to develop that the origins of civilization is the West. The origins of civilization is the West is not a working argument, because the Greeks preceding the Romans got their alphabets from the Phoenicians. So the discovery in the 19th century and in the first part of the 20th century created some kind of distrust against the culture at some points, especially with biblical archaeology. The long-standing notions, the West underlies the beginning of history. It appeared it did not work. So scholars, intellectuals, writers, both wanted to take advantage of this difference as well as understand this culture, because remember, without a mirror, you cannot really see yourself. So like Lacan's mirror image, each culture functions like a mirror image to each. So it is good. Like you can look through the window, but see what is outside yourself. But when you look yourself in the mirror, you look yourself in the mirror. So the mirror helps you understand yourself. So it is good always to have mirrors. So Indian philosophy has inspired Eliot as well as Ezra Pound and the American expatriates in London at the time to develop an interest in there, and partly because they love this extravaganza, originality, sort of exotism. Exotism is part of the job. Yes, I would agree with that. But then again, they actually colonize. They also colonize the Hindu philosophy to speak up for a Western phenomenon. That we can talk about this, but like there's not much time. Let me read some passage, if you will. Eliot wrote the last section of the poem quite rapidly, compared with the others, where he was under considerable psychological pressure. Of course, it is these goddamn women, and he was suffering from his wife. And you know, we love to put the blame on women all the time. And Eliot particularly had this problem. It was a time, Schwartz knows, when he was even contemplating withdrawal into the hermitage of a Buddhist monastery. So it is so deep. The effect is so deep. Eliot also had some reservations about Christianity at that time. As late as 1927, he expressed his wish that Christianity would probably continue to modify itself. See, there is that doubt with Christianity, as in the past, into something that can be believed in. So there's things that, you know, he cannot believe in, or he cannot sort of empathize with. He kind of takes interest in Hindu or Eastern philosophy in general, but particularly in Hindu philosophy. The aridity that has swept through the Western scape has stretched in the last part onto the Indian in the last section. The dialogic personas mention of Ganga, the Ganges River, and the Himalayas are important symbols that immediately evoke the Indian mythology and beliefs, and has juggled the usual order of the Upanishadic dicta, the usual images of the river and the mountain to suit his purpose. He is, however, meticulous in his preference of using the original and not the anglicized names of Ganga. So he uses the original names, not the anglicized versions of them, to conjure fully the images that have been associated with them for millennia by the Indians, by the Hindus, I mean. Ganga was sunken, and the limbed leaves waited for rain while the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavans. The jungle crouched, pumped in silence, then spoke the thunder. Datta, what have we given? My friends, blood shaking my heart, the awful daring of a moment's surrender, which an age of prudence can never retract. By this, and this only, we have existed, which is not to be found in our obituaries. So it goes on. And then comes the other one, Davatyam this time. I have heard the key, turn in the door once and turn once only. We think of the key, each in his prison, beautiful, each in his prison. Only at nightfall, ethereal rumors revive for a moment a broken Coriolanus. Damyata. The boat responded gaily to the hand, expert with sail and oar. The sea was calm, your heart would have responded gaily when invited, obedient to controlling hands. Datta, Davatyam, Damyata, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, each time you read this, you kind of take a deep breath, because the lines are beautiful, but sometimes Eliot's mind is kind of overy. The way he looks at life, looks at women, and a lot of values that actually make us human seem to be missing from his poetry. I wish he could have cared more about those other values that make us human, and rather than just be critical of the scenes that he's been observing through, and the presence of Yoruba of the time. So as a concluding remark, it suffices the Buddhistic imperatives, Datta, Davatvam, Damyata, appear to be a prescription, not an ultimate cure for the wastelanders. The words Shanti, Shanti, close the wasteland and come out like an amen to a Christian's prayers. But this is not a Christian prayer. The amen refers only to the wish that the prayers should be accepted. It doesn't guarantee that the wish will be granted or that salvation will be realized. Consequently, dystopic wasteland and the suggested means for salvation totally lack in the here and the now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this reading, for these readings of T.S. Eliot poems. We know that we could have a whole course on T.S. Eliot on the,
Yes,
and,
exactly.
and go through the many perspectives and ways of reading it. It's such, 500 lines of, there are so dense, and as you said, you need encyclopedic knowledge to understand it. I remember when studying the first time Wasteland, I had to buy so many books to understand what I was speaking about. He wants that.
Yeah.
He wants the reader. He wants the reader to go and check, as he did in many ways. I would add that, as you explained very well, you also need interdisciplinary knowledge. This is one of the points of the Wasteland as well. We can say that today. We didn't say that 20 years ago, but you need interdisciplinary knowledge from Jung, if you want, from Jung to Sanskrit, okay, from linguistics to so forth and so on. I would like to add 2 points for the students present. The first point is that it was implicit in your speech, and it was not our focus today, but for the students that may have to relate on the Wasteland in their exams in June, secondary school students, that is that we all agree that these dystopian elements are related to the Wasteland, which is permeated, we can say, by the shadow of World War I. It was published in 1922, so the war is at the background. That is, he quotes everything, he doesn't need to quote the war. The war, an allusion to the devastation of the war, has become the wasteland in our culture. Not only, it has become, even it's the First World War, the expression the wasteland describes a catastrophic scenario from then onwards. The other element I want to add for the students is that this year, 2021, is 700 years after Dante's death. So if the students need to quote a very modern homage to Dante, to the Divine Comedy, they can quote T.S. Eliot, because T.S. Eliot works and reworks on Dante, sulla Divina Commedia. So that this is the link for the students, as you understand, because they will probably have questions on Dante on the one hand and T.S. Eliot on the other. So thank you very much. If you want to add something on these 2 points, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your contributions as well. Yeah, I mean, as you said, you can talk about T.S. Eliot, just this poem, like for weeks and weeks. I mean, this could go, deciphering the text would take you a semester, if you will. And while like doing research, actually, like I mean, the guy is crazy. He loves this like to send you like hunters after hunt for his sources, and how those sources kind of connect with that specific line in his poetry. And that's partly the pleasure of reading Eliot. It enriches you,
That's it.
It is not just also kind of enrichment. Yeah. Personal development.
Are there Are there any questions?
Thank you so much for this very interesting insight. Do you have any questions here? Also, the attendees online? If not, I've got a few questions. You know, it is one of my favorite works, so that's why I would like to know more about it. So the first one deals with the interpretation you provided for the young man. You know, I can see the young man, so the sort of absence of God, absence of, you know, the ability, this inability to see God. The tarot cards, you know, as far as I remember, this is a symbol that recalls the inability to take action. So to be puzzled, to be stuck in a certain situation and not to be able to act. How would you interpret this other, you know, symbol from tarot card interpretation, and how does it relate to this context, you know, that you have just propounded?
The tarot cards are used in the poem, yes, like for points of procrastination. But then again, the idea is to distinguish between fate and also luck. The two are different. In the one case, you have divine involvement. The ancient Greeks did know that. You know, there is nothing left to chance. The tarot cards are like expressions of kind of dilettantism. Madame Sosotris. Eliot is like almost like obsessed with women, and in the case of Madame Sosotris, the European clairvoyant, so he's kind of being critical of specifically women who, rather than, you know, following religious creeds like Christian faith, is now like trying to get help from, say, tarot cards or like gambling cards. As far as hesitation is concerned, he does use that, you know, matter in Hamlet, earlier in the law. Though I personally don't believe that Hamlet hesitates. Actually, he does calculate everything. He has no hesitation, but when Eliot wrote this poem, the common understanding or interpretation of Hamlet was like along the lines of hesitation or procrastination. And there is also like Oedipus complex theory developed based on like his relationship with the uncle king now. I don't know whether I'm answering the question. He's being critical of those. Like the inability to act is, yes, like on many platforms, like in many ways, including the sexual, emotional, and everything. And probably Eliot is also like shedding light on the present state of affairs, considering the current situation in cultures. Like people love to talk about the phones, but rather than talk through the phones, the phones are not. The phones are supposed to be like communication vehicles, but everybody has got communication, and this is a common problem in Eliot's poetry, like communication. Or when there is communication, it comes out like in outbursts of emotion. So again, it is women distressed, or it is women depressed. Somehow women are supposed to be prone to those things rather than men. Men are described like the Irish guys as rude examples of being, but not necessarily depressed. But certainly, I can assuredly say, the hope does not come from Christian scriptures. The hope you expect at the end of the poem does not come from Christian scriptures. And that's what has intrigued me actually when I was doing my research. Like such a conservative guy, like dominating, like Eliot is not pretending. He's quite a sincere believer. But then again, that doesn't come. Is he because he's being realistic because somehow Christianity does not provide a cure to the illnesses, so to say, at the time, or it has proved to be futile? I remember a while ago I was quoting that, you know, Christianity should, he says, renew itself or do something about itself to be believable, to be believable.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure, sure.
Any other question?
I would have another one, but I don't want to leave time to students, so let's wait for them first.
Okay.
Yeah, please don't be shy. I'm sure you have a comment or observations, curiosity, anything. Okay, going back to the plurality of languages that we see in the wasteland, you know, there is also a period where authors, the modernist authors, modernist writers experience a sense of inadequacy, linguistic inadequacy, you know, a sense of helplessness, linguistic inadequacy. And this is also the period where, you know, one of the most important linguists, you know, Ferdinand de Saussure, starts to talk about arbitrariness of languages. So can it be related, this pluralism of languages that we can find in the wasteland can actually be interpreted as a way of conveying this linguistic inadequacy, in the sense that, okay, there is no language that best fits on my tongue, so I use a plurality of languages.
I would believe that, you know, these quotations from different languages, from text written in different languages, intends to integrate the West as a totality. There were linguistic studies in the 19th century, and, you know, massive again studies in the early 20th century. And remember again, Ferdinand de Saussure, for instance, presented his theories again at that time, at that time period. Probably Eliot also, I have not studied anything on that, but Eliot probably was interested in language studies, but like more than a linguist, he's interested in the culturalist sense of the word, like how language actually creates a mediocrity against which cultural values kind of can flourish. So be it Italian, be it Latin, be it Greek, be it German, or like considering the Irish accent, and he does present that. So he knows that, you know, the language can also represent you the best in those situations. Probably, though he doesn't like the romantics, you know, he goes against the romantics in many of like his political discussions. But then again, Eliot is interesting. Sometimes he goes against what he says earlier. He might be pursuing this romantic understanding that, you know, you explore people in their natural environment, in their through their natural language. Remember, you know, Biographia Literaria, or the Romantic Manifesto talks about those. Though they mean to say that in terms of like people unadulterated by culture, not sophisticated, but by keeping their language in their pure form, because keeping the language in its pure form would mean that they keep their emotions in pure form. And this goes back to 17th century philosophies mainly, the French philosophy and like discovery of America, the emergence of the new man, or the creation of the new man in America, and how it has affected European culture. Like Rousseau talks about it, remember? Like he goes against culture because culture has a distorting influence, whereas nature like keeps you in your pristine form. So living in nature is like living in pre-Leptarian state, like pre-fall state in Paris. Do you see what I mean? Like I'm talking about the Bible, like before the fall. So you come to the city, the urban life is like the life after the fall. So that transition is like between culture, nature, and culture.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yes, I think we could carry on, but we should stop now and meet again at 12 o'clock, so that our guests can have a 10-minute break. We'll have a coffee in the meantime. Thank you very much for this stimulating and lesson, and I hope we can carry on with T.S. Eliot in the future. So many points I would like to discuss, but we'll convene in 10 minutes so you can have a break. Una pausa di 10 minuti e poi riprendiamo con la sessione successiva su Dystopia and American Cinema.
Yeah, because here they have the mask on, so at least they can take some fresh air before starting again at 12. Okay, so see you in 10 minutes, Prof, ok?
10 minuti, va bene?
Va bene, ci vediamo dopo.
Senti, io invece volevo dirti, potevi chiamarmi ieri, comunque hai preso la decisione giusta.
Mi piaceva rompere le scatole di domenica.
Stavo lavorando, quindi
anzi. Mille cose da fare, mi dispiaceva, ho detto tanto beh, la gestiamo, ho detto però intanto vediamo.
Va bene, è stata una decisione buonissima, come ti ho scritto. Ci aggiorniamo tra 10 minuti così lui può respirare, va bene?
A tra poco.
Riprendiamo con il nostro ospite nella seconda sessione di oggi, il professor Metin Bosnak della Zaim University di Istanbul is going to speak now on dystopia and American cinema. Thank you.
Thank you. Linguists like to love to describe things through neologisms and theoreticians love to do that in a similar vein. Probably that's how the concept dystopia has emerged in history. So dystopia, as you know, is an inverted utopia, and it is the Greeks who have invented the term originally. And the Greek language seems to be like prolific in terms of creation of new terms, concepts, Latin too. So out of the term like autopos, and EU topos, a combination of the two, Thomas More came up with utopia, like when he published his work, and not to our surprise, he published the work in Latin. It was not published in English because the English language was not like was not capable, people thought, or writing in the vernacular was not a good idea because it did not show the sophistication of the writer at the time. So true or false was in Latin, so it was translated later on. But of course, like when Thomas More came up with this idea, he actually referred to the double nature of utopia. On the one hand, it is a place, EU topos, that means a good place, right? And also autopos, because it is simply nowhere. But before the term was invented, of course, there were dystopias in practice. And if you trace the origins of utopia and dystopia back to the ancient times, you see, for instance, the Epic of Gilgamesh, interestingly talking about a kind of deluge, and also the hero hunting after infinity or immortality for his friend. This is good. This is good for a friend. He's looking for immortality, ways of immortality, talking to gods, but failing in the end. But then again, you know, this Sumerian epic introduces us to a world where, you know, there is actually no death. I don't know what would happen if there were no death. Would it be better, like, or is death a curse, or actually life is a curse in itself? Those are like debatable issues. So the Sumerians discovered like the double nature of living as well as dying, but like that Gilgamesh hankers for a solution for the immortality of the friend is something that I find remarkable at that time, and it was written in 2000, according to many scholars, before Christ. And in ancient Greece, of course, you have the Homeric epics describing Elysian paradises, and in a similar vein, those are places where like all kinds of comfort you might seek is there. And interestingly, Homer does not talk very highly of women, and however, like he associate this paradisal or utopian ambience with geography. This is very like weirdly interesting, because you're gonna see something like that in American culture. So you're happy with nature, with the so-called nature alone, with no women around, and that's why the cowboys are never supposed to marry, right? So they are supposed to be alone. They're lone warriors, lone journeymen. However, you know, though they may prefer to dally with women once in a while in downtown areas, they leave the women behind and then move on. They have to ride on because they have to move to the West, because Americans love to discover nature as the West now. Yeah, the American West, not the West we discussed earlier. That is in the sense of civilization. Because if you are married and tied down with a home-based married life and children, of course, you cannot like progress. This is the basic idea the Americans have been cherishing, and early glimpses of that idea you can find in ancient Greece. Probably the attitude towards women was conditioned by that idea that, you know, women are troublesome. Therefore, paradise is something, and you keep women away from paradise because they would turn paradise into hell. So our understanding of utopia is and dystopia is actually like the scriptures describe to us, like in terms of paradise and hell. And talking about paradise and hell, written in between 8th and 6th centuries, the Bible, the Jewish Bible, in Genesis, talks about paradise, the Garden of Eden, as you know. And in the Garden of Eden, Yahweh creates everything, flora and fauna that you know, Adam could take advantage of. But then again, considers that, you know, it is not good for man to be alone. He creates he creates a woman, Eve, out of Adam's rib. And how does that happen? That happens by having Adam sleep and then taking one of his ribs and turning that rib into old Isha. That means woman in the Hebrew language. After the cover, the world, I'm sorry, the Garden of Eden is no longer that peaceful place, because the woman is going to, of course, venture for knowledge, right? So God forbids them two essential trees. One is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The other one is the tree of living. So the serpent in agricultural societies is an important figure, and it is supposed to work against God. We are going to see the same serpent in the Christian Gospels as well. So the serpent one day sees Eve wandering off. We don't know where Adam was at that time, but like she wanders into the woods and then sees the serpent, and the serpent is a persuasive figure, it seems. Earlier, she resists, she seems to be resisting, but then again, she accepts the idea that, like, you know, she better enjoy this fruit, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then Adam comes and she urges Adam to eat from the same fruit. Thus, they both are supposed to be falling figures from then onwards. And of course, God appears out of nowhere, striding in the garden, and then as like punishment, he says, "You're gonna suffer for this." And then when they are thrown out of paradise, Adam and Eve, they of course fall. However, this fall also marks the beginning of like centuries-long suffering and the so-called original sin. So in the Middle Ages, the idea of the original sin got a twist in terms of its interpretation, because, you know, scholars have thought about why the heck do we have to suffer due to a woman? A woman, because, you know, the figure of Eve is supposed to be the origin of not only the sin but also death. You know, in the Bible, in apocryphal writings especially, it is clearly stated that, you know, Eve is the cause of death and suffering on earth. And this call, the new codification of this sin in the Christian writings turns into a kind of fortunate fall thing. That is like, thank God, we have fallen. Why? Because this fall is going to also like lead to the emergence of Jesus Christ. So this is actually a lucky fall, but this is a later interpretation in the Middle Ages. So the Bible, the Old Testament, gives you glimpses of not only paradise but also the eventual hell on earth. So our lives on earth are supposed to be hellish, and this marks the beginnings of another problematic issue in Judeo-Christian tradition. If we are sinful, then we suffer for this. What is the solution for that? Then the solution comes through the Gospels. Jesus Christ is supposed to redeem us from our sins and lead us to paradise. So he is no earthly figure, he is like a representation of God, or even God, being Son of God on earth. Thus, he is going to function as the Lamb of God, being sacrificed, and then atone for our sins. You know this whole story, but the story does not end there. This is just the beginning, as you know. So, similarly, in the 5th century, in the Platonic dialogues, we see in the Republic, for instance, Plato does not like the poets. He wants to banish them because these are troublesome guys, and they don't know how to fight. Whereas in Sparta, people are warriors. They learn how to fight from very early, ages on. Therefore, they have managed to fight against and beat the Persians. So the Spartans are good guys. The Athenians have been sort of effeminate owing to the influence of fine arts. That's why they cannot fight very well. So the poets should either serve the state according to Plato, or else they should be banished. And remember, again, banishment is like a quarantining process. It is kind of like a pandemic at the time. It's a literary pandemic. So you're banishing the virus. By banishing the virus, you're protecting the community. I don't know, like whether I am being clear. I'll proceed with other like historical data on the history of utopia and dystopia, and then I'll be focusing on the Blade Runner.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Aristotle has his own description of utopian lives and utopian topos. So an orderly universe is what Aristotle is kind of hankering for, because he was a biologist. According to his theory, even like his perspective of literature is like biological. He dissects the society into communities, and then if everything, like all the limbs function in the society perfectly well, then you already have this like utopian society. And of course, in the Middle Ages, you have again the City of God, a Christian utopia by Saint Augustine, one of the great thinkers of all time, who talks about the ideal city. And that ideal city is supposed to operate according to Christian principles. Andrea later on in the French tradition is going to turn this into a Christianopolis, like a city where everything operates according to Christian principles. Thus, that's going to be a paradisal place, a paradise on earth. Jesus Christ in the Gospels does not offer you a paradise on earth, as you know. Each time people like approach him for ways of like living better on earth, he says, my kingdom is not of this world, but of the other one. Therefore, like his descriptions of paradise would be probably a reversal of whatever you have experienced, say, on this earth. So if you're poor on this world, then you're going to be rich in the other one. So one happens at the expense of another. The Middle Ages have got inspiration mainly from the Judeo-Christian tradition, not the Greco-Roman, until the Renaissance, of course, and works that promise salvation, or like salvation itself is paradisal, and that comes through Jesus Christ, according to this theoretical approach. So there is not descriptions, but a system of creed that leads you to paradise, but only when you die. When you die. The Renaissance thinkers, through the revival of classical works and also the influence of Andalusian literature, produced a body of utopian literature as well. Somehow those times probably were like more hopeful, and with the Renaissance, you know, the explorations come, discoveries come, and America renews in European society the hope of a potential utopia. So Puritans, that is American Protestants, when they go to America, either as indentured slaves or like paying for their fare to America, they think this is the beginning of Earth. So they consider America like the new Garden of Eden. The new Garden of Eden, because there is not like human beings, or at least that's what they think, or they want to see. There's of course like Native Americans, and they give these names to America open based on their reading of the Bible. So the names given to America are like the Garden of Eden, New Eden, the Promised Land, the New Promised Land, or New Jerusalem, or the city upon the hill. So America is now the reenactment of the biblical history. So like the ancient Israelites who suffered in Egypt and go through the Sinai to the Promised Land, these Americans, the early settlers of America, they were not like politically speaking American, but they're the first settlers, the Puritan fathers, so to say. So they suffer in England or in Europe because of their beliefs. They now take this voyage across the Atlantic and then come to the Promised Land, which is now America. So they see a lot of parallelisms between their lives, the Puritans, and the lives of the ancient Israelites. Since they read only the Bible, everything they associate with the environment comes out of the Bible. So the naming process is also related to that. Thus, the roles assigned to men and women are again along these biblical lines. As the centuries go by, you have like Thomas More's Utopia. We talked about it a while ago. And then other utopias abound, especially in the 19th century. The 19th century was like the beginning of the 19th century was actually full of hope. And actually the Darwinian theory of evolution meant that, you know, as time goes by, humanity is going to have better things, better lives, more comfortable lives, easier lives. Therefore, like machinery, industrial revolution, machines substituting people will provide us with all this opportunity of the manual work. Thus, we human beings, we're going to have better lives, happier lives. The ideas were so, you know, vibrant at the time, as far as this revolution was concerned, that, you know, Veblen writes a whole book on the theory of leisure, and he says, you know, as time goes by, people are going to have more leisure, so they won't have to invest their lives like all those like good years in working, but in self-development or personal development. So the human societies were going to be better again as time went on, because evolution meant that each year that passes by is going to make your lives better. So this was such a period. The 19th century also witnesses, especially the second half of the 19th century, witnesses the emergence of dystopian writing at the same time. The difference between utopias and dystopias is essentially, you have an idealized vision of a society in your mind, actually, in both. In the one case, like in utopias, you have the writer visualizing this image, like picturing to yourself the image of this ideal place where everyone is happy, most common like human problems are resolved, with like all functions of a society, like workplace and all education are resolved. So there is no problem or even conflict. But then again, the dystopian too has an idealized vision of a country or a place, a land, if you will, and people, an educational system, a political system to go with it. However, the dystopian recognizes that this is impossible to realize on this earth. That's why they are called dystopias or inverted utopias. The 19th century bombards the reading public with dystopian writing, but especially in the 20th century, we see a lot of dystopian writing owing to wars, First World War, Second World War, and the relationship between the so-called bourgeois and the working class, all the problems involved, and the problems again, men and women, they're all like foregrounded. Thus, you see works like The Brave New World, probably trying to kind of centralize, standardize, robotize, if you will, human society through not creation but production of human beings. Thus, they have a standard. They have a standard now. This idea of standardization of our lives is connected also with education. In the 19th century, mass production, the idea of mass production was also applied to the idea of mass production of human beings. Of course, you cannot standardize probably the bodies, but like mentally, intellectually, you could probably standardize them. So this gave an impetus for the ruling elite at times, and conditioning became one of the focal points of creating ideal societies, because the differences were supposed to be the sources of the conflict. If everyone were the same, then probably you would have no problems. So this is weird, but this was the idea, the main tenet of utopian thinking, assisted by modern technology. Early critiques of this idea that you cannot really realize this this utopian state comes in Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels, especially in book 4, you have this representation of an ideal society, but it is like far from human in many ways. And Gulliver comes back home already dehumanized, and he doesn't want to even spend time with his wife and children because he considers all humans as yahoos, where it's like he's acquainted with and almost falls in love with the Winnims in the Winnim land. So all these ideas now tend to focus on how to kind of disconnect a particular society from the rest of the society, so that you can build up an ideal society, a utopian place, thus not infect them with the rest of the society. Remember, this is again based on the American continental experience. So American continental experience was based on the idea, remember, that it is a new Eden. It is a new Eden, and American settlers were supposed to be, Adams and Eves, new Adams and Eves. If this is the new Eden and American settlers were like new Adams and Eves, then what are we gonna do about the serpent? Where is the serpent? So the serpent, they thought, would be associated with the Native Americans. So they are the serpents now. They are the only hindrance to the new place. In William Golding's Lord of the Flies, you have the reenactment of the biblical fall, because kids are isolated from the mainland after a plane crash, and by doing that, and placing the kids on this remote island, the author intends to show us that by cutting these children off from the influence of the culture, these kids will develop their own innocent habits, not acculturated and adulterated by the parents. But then again, it doesn't work, it seems, that way. So the children start a fight, and then there is killing, there is conflict among them. Thus, we are supposed to understand that the problem is not in the place where you live. It is in you as human beings. So you are the problem yourself. Do you have any questions or comments so far?
No, I think we can proceed and have questions afterwards,
Okay.
if you agree.
Okay, I move on. All right. So in British literature, American literature, European literature, the theme of disillusionment becomes more and more frequent as human societies become sort of more complicated, or we develop habits, new habits through technology, through manufacturing, and of course this is coupled with revolutionary movements like in the Bolshevik Revolution, and how societies can be managed. That's the essential idea, probably, and how they fail afterwards, though they begin with great expectations, to use a Dickensian term. So in Orwell's Animal Farm, we see how hopeful a community of animals, that is human beings, begin to dream about a new way of life. But then again, the leaders from amongst these animals prove to be worse leaders than the old masters. So Orwell is providing you again with the idea that the same conditions breed the same people. breed, the same people. It is not necessarily like a single track category you're talking about or you can talk about. How do I mean that? I mean, you know, if animals are capable of like abusing other animals, they can. The problem here is about probably regulations and of course the consciousness of every individual. Otherwise, you know, you can be deluded into thinking that you're living in a paradisal environment, but then again, actually you are in hell. Again, in Happy Days, a play, remember the case of a housewife who is troubled, who suffers, but then again, every day, like she's almost drowned, like buried up to here in the ground. But then again, she goes, I am very happy, I am very happy, I am very happy. So you are trying to say that you're happy, not necessarily you are happy. So you have all these ideas about, you know, about something going wrong in the world, and that dystopia is also reflected in the relatively newer medium, the cinema. I don't want to go back to the origins of the movie, but the Blade Runner proves to be one of those dystopias in American tradition. It is interesting in many ways, including how it works or reenacts the theme of creation in a modern environment, and then in the way it arranges the relationship between the state, the modern metropolis, and the individual, the police state. And throughout the movie, you also see darkness overwhelmingly there. And actually you see sunlight like for less than seconds. And that is even artificial. So Ridley Scott presents us with a dystopian vision of the world set in where Los Angeles, when 2019, like 5 years back, you will remember, like Blade Runner 2049 was shown. So it was a sequel to the Blade Runner we are going to be talking about. I wish I could share parts of the movie with you and then discuss the dystopian motives or leitmotifs in the movie. Do you have any questions so far, by the way?
No? From here? No? Your line attendees?
Yes. I mean, you speak of dystopian motives in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
I don't believe it is a dystopia. I agree with the dystopian motives in the film, but I would not call it a dystopia. What do you think?
I believe that this is a dystopian movie, like putting aside the layers of like sci-fi and all that. And actually, I published an article describing all these processes. I can share the article with you if you want.
Okay.
But let me talk about why I consider it a dystopia.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
In dystopias, you know, you often have a narrator or somebody that journeys through a utopia. I'm sorry, through the dystopia, right? Like in The Wasteland, actually. Like Tiresias moves through the wasteland and giving us like pictures, portrayals of different lives, often sorted in the wasteland. You're here operating through the camera, and the camera is introducing you to several scenes of the dystopia. So I'm gonna try to share the like some specific scenes with you, and then talk about those scenes. Okay, let me give it a shot. Can you see the movie?
Not yet.
You have to share the screen. Go.
Yeah.
You see the red, the green? No, you have not shared the screen yet. You must share the screen and then we'll see it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
You can hear it as well, right? You can hear the sound?
No. No, no sound.
Because there is an option, share with audio. So you need to select that option.
We use Teams at the university, so I am new to this stuff.
Okay.
Let me try it again. So before I share it, I have to specify that, huh?
Share with audio, yes. Close it now, close it.
Okay.
Okay, and go to share, and there's an option, share with audio.
Share sound, okay. Yeah, okay. I think.
We don't see it yet.
I did.
Now the film. Your clip.
You don't see it, huh?
No.
Sorry about it.
Okay, this is your screen. Now you have to click on the video. Where is the video? Open the video. Okay, 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 fine. Now we should be able to hear it as well. Okay, that's fine.
Oh, good, good. All right. The music is by Evangelist. The soundtrack.
Good.
Please pay attention to the soundtrack and let me know how that feels. Like, what kind of messages, vibes do you get? Oh, this is a projection onto the future. The movie was made originally in 1982, and then the director's cut came later on. So it's about these replicants for like superior in strength and agility, and at least equal in intelligence to the genetic engineers who created them. So these guys are called Nexus 6. we understand that these guys were created, these like next to 6 series were created for use off-world, and they're like practically they are slaves. They serve certain like human purposes, including sexual, and they're like physically better built. But there is one thing that is that's lesser in them, which is their lifetime. So the creators of these robots, Nexus 6s, think that they may develop in time emotions. So when they develop emotions, this is going to be dangerous. Remember? So in order to avoid that, they provide them with a built-in safety device. So after 4 years, they are supposed to die out. Yes. And these replicants, notice that there's a problem with their lifetime. Therefore, they come to the Earth to discover how to reach longevity, how to live longer. That's where the problems begin. And Tyrell Corporation, this is like the god of this place, also the manufacturer, the mastermind. So what he does is like they develop this like eye test, which shows that if you have developed emotions, then they'll retire you, they'll kill you, because emotions are dangerous. Otherwise, you go on your own way. This theme is explored in Blade Runner 2049 as well, by the way. Remember K? Each time he goes on a mission, he comes back and then he goes interlinked, which is reconfirmation of the old order. The war drums and the rising sound, the cadences, and then the falling intends to kind of place you in a certain mood. And as you see, like we still have the black screen and the subtitles on that, like superimposed on the black screen. This is Los Angeles. Los Angeles means the city of angels, right? Let's see what do we have here. Just look at these like high towers and the eruptions like volcano all over the place. Yes, that eye. Now, let's look at the eye. Let's focus on the eye for a minute, please. What does the eye look at? What does the eye at?
They're saying the universe from here.
It's a depressing scene, right? Like the eye is kind of looking over the city with all these eruptions and dark, depressively dark moments. And actually throughout the movie, you have these scenes. It never like gets lost, only for like temporarily lit and artificial lit scenes twice. And the eye also looks at us as we look at the eye. So it's like kind of multiple interpretations we can have of the eye. And this eye could also be linked up with like a higher eyeing being, so to say. As you see here, I don't know whether you see the cursor movements. You see here two eyeballs like structures with lights upward. Again, the human eye kind of superimposed on these objects. So the camera now is shooting up this building, this pyramid-like building. When you sort of shoot the object from top from bottom up, what you're doing is kind of you're giving this impression of this like immensely huge or grandiose motive, and it is kind of linked up with the sky as well. But there is no sun at all in the totality of the city of angels. So we are zooming in on, thus the camera kind of in there.
Places, sure, I guess.
The replicants, you know, these are created according to different purposes, and this guy knows actually that, you know, he has those like he is conscious. Let me put it that way. He is conscious of what is going on. So he's a dangerous figure. So what are you gonna do? Destroy the guy. But before that, you have to like consider cause-effect relationships, and then decide for good whether this is gone or like whether you could like take advantage of this guy any longer.
Is that part of the test?
No, just warming you up, that's all.
It's not fancy or anything.
You're in a desert, walking along in the sand when all of a
Is
sudden...
this the test now?
Yes, you're in a desert, walking along in the sand when all of a sudden you look...
What one?
What?
What desert?
Doesn't make any difference what desert, is completely hypothetical.
But how come I'd be there?
These are clues. These are clues that, you know, this guy has developed like responses, like human responses. I mean, you don't question Holden, the Inquisitor, about what kind of desert. You are supposed to just give answers. Whereas when you ask questions, then that means you have a position, you have a subjective position. You have a self there, which the system doesn't at all want.
Maybe you're fed up. Maybe you want to be by yourself. Who knows? You look down and you see a tortoise, Leon. It's crawling towards you.
Tortoise? What's that?
You know what a turtle is?
Of course.
Same thing.
Never seen a turtle. But I understand what you mean.
You reach down, you flip the tortoise over on its back, Leon.
Do you make up these questions, Mr. Holden? Or do they write them down for you?
No,
The tortoise
difficult. I mean, do you write them yourself or are they written down for you? So he understands that there is somebody that is running the system. You're part of that slavery process. Whereas I am supposed to be this like android, but I know all these things he means to say. And then, of course, he shoots Holden to death.
Is on his back, his belly. Shall we continue? Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind. About your mother?
My mother? Yeah. Let me tell you about my mother.
Let me tell you about my mother. So he knows everything going on. So asking a question about the mother would mean like hurting his feelings, because this is a fake process he's supposed to go through. And of course, we have all the commercials that commercial ads projected on top of the buildings or like throughout the buildings. Pan Am and this like Japanese or Chinese looking lady, again, advertising a lot of things along the way. So all the movie is like depressively dark throughout.
No, 4.
Our
2, 4.
he speaks in English, and this Chinese guy speaks in Chinese, but actually he knows English.
And noodles.
That's Leon, ammunition loader on intergalactic.
Deckard does not want to take the job. He's an ex-cop, but he's forced to take the job, and the job is like hunt down all these guys because they are dangerous. The explore here is like the references to the 6 days of creation in the Bible, right? And how human beings develop consciousness outside the deeds. They like long for knowledge through Eve, and then they're expelled from that paradise. So that brings problem to them, and what we explore in the movie is something similar here. Nexus 6 comes out of this like 6 days of creation, and also these guys are like the new fallen angels. In fact, towards the end of the movie, the leader of the team will be talking about actually quoting from several poems which include those themes. Higher the angels fell, higher the angels fell, referring to Milton's Paradise Lost.
Run. He can lift 400-pound atomic loads.
So this is Rachel, a biblical name. I'm sorry. Rachel is an android, like the others are, but she doesn't know that. She's a special product of Tyrell Corporation.
By mistake? By mistake?
He is going to put her to test to understand the validity of the tests. I-comp test, void-comp, I'm sorry, I-tests.
No.
But in your position, that is a risk.
Is this to be an empathy test? Capillary dilation of the so-called blush
So
response?
this is Eldon Tyrell. He's the god of this new universe. In Blade Runner 2049, we have another figure who has replaced him. The guy there has developed a new agricultural system to feed humanity. And then he has gone on to produce human beings in vitro, not necessarily through natural reproduction. The questioning inquiry phase.
To recognize in them.
I just do eyes. Just
the leader of the team. Initially, he appears like a demonic figure, but then again, he is transformed along the way to become a Christ-like figure towards the end of the movie, because he is not going to kill the guy, and in fact, he prefers to die to let the others die. So that Jesus figure is explored through this guy.
Now,
he is looking down the balcony from this like high-rising building where only Deckard lives in, and it is all dark everywhere. And as you see, it is very cold because he has this blanket like covering him.
Oh, man.
The figure of the serpentine woman, Salome, again, a figure from the Bible. So the movie has a lot of references to the Bible, biblical figures.
That's not my department. Actually, get a glimpse of a beautiful...
We see Rachel changing a bit from the old Rachel that is kind of mechanical in appearance and talk to a like a feminine woman, so to say. And then there develops an emotional response between the two. But the system is not like wanting to let them kind of unite. But we will see. There is a fight in this scene between the two guys because both are trying to understand each other's like emotional thresholds. And when she's about to leave after this like the transformation of the hair and everything, somehow this is gonna turn into a different. They're gonna go over the threshold. They're gonna make good friends, but the system desire that she be killed, like Rachel should be killed. Of course, he doesn't do that. Yes, this is Roy. He's the leader of the squad. But then again, towards the end of the movie, he kind of transforms from a demonic figure to a Jesus-like figure. Let's see some of that, and then we can discuss. Fingers. Earlier, what the Roy does is, you know, he breaks the fingers of this guy because he has killed all his friends. So he wants him to feel that pain first, but he's not intending to kill Deckard.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
By the way, see the nail in his right hand. Earlier, he has put that through his hand, like Jesus is crucified. So he goes through that experience. And then the transformation starts. And he does it by himself.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
And the white pigeon goes off. In this like ovary scene, as you see, it doesn't go like parallel to the building, but like sort of sideways. So in this beautiful scene, he quotes these passages and then says, "Time to die," and he dies. With Deckard looking like in confusion at the guy, and not understanding why the guy has not killed him. Because interestingly, though these guys are humanoids, they are more human than human beings. They have more solidarity among themselves. They love, they kind of support each other. Whereas, you know, Deckard is functioning like one of the hands of this police system of censorship and control. Somehow the spiritual development, I mean, that's what kind of attracts me like more here. How Roy develops into this Jesus-like figure. Remember that that nail again in his hand, which he has put through. in order to kind of empathize or show his empathy with the Deckard's pains. And then the moment he is going to fall off the building, he saves him up with that hand he has nailed. So those all kind of remind you of the historical mission of Jesus Christ. And also remember, this white pigeon is also like biblical in nature in many ways. So what happens then? Roy earlier kills Alden Tyrell. Alden Tyrell, El in the Hebrew language, it refers to God, you know. Like when you say Tyrell, like the tyrant of God, so to say. So it connotes a lot of things. Alden Tyrell. And that also takes you to another philosophical discussion of like killing God, which Nietzsche, like when he like he's reported to have said like their God is taught, and we have killed him, he says. So all these elements, poetic, philosophical, like cinematography put together. And Ridley Scott is a guy who is said to have left nothing to chance, like very, very minute details in the scenes he takes care of nitpickingly and then turns them into a movie. And the movie, as it ends, is still like depressively dark. See, Deckard. He looks old. Rachel is sleeping. This is the Sleeping Beauty scene. You can remember. So he kisses Rachel, and Rachel wakes up. And then they leave together. So this Japanese looking guy, Jap, is going to say that, no, it is a pity that she won't live. But then again, who does? And then he goes off the scene. And another interesting point, like throughout the movie, is like these like paperworks that these guys kind of make as new sequences come in to refer to as certain scenes and then make a meaning out of them, you know, like a chicken in one case and a match in another case. So a unicorn image in another case. Unicorn does tell you something about the dream work, about the potential dream or hope. But then again, you know, it doesn't change the totality of the movie. So I wish I could have like shared this version of the movie before, and you could have gone through the whole movie to focus on scenes. But you know, in this limited time period, I have like skimmed and scanned through only some scenes, and I believe this is a very beautiful movie. Each time, you know, I published an article on this movie, but each time I still have that pleasure. Thank you very much. I am now ready to get your questions, comments, objections, or rejections. And
thank you very much. You must be very tired. We you know, sort of got you speaking for hours, and we feel sorry for this, but in the meantime, we all also thank you very much for sharing with us your vision of such a wonderful film and on the question of dystopia. Yes, it's true. This film, you could go through it and see other things and so on. I saw that you ended with the novel based on Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. The philosophy behind the film is by the American science fiction writer. I'm quoting in this way for the students, not for you, as you understand, who had these visions, let's say, the one of the elements you quoted is also the dream of the replicants and not the dreams of the humans, or maybe, as we know, the end of the story, maybe the replicants are more human than the humans, and maybe the humans having to do with the replicants here. The female replicant at the end, maybe they can start understanding humanity. I mean, this just to comment on the picture you gave as a whole. So see, I was following your talk today. We're going back to the beginning. That is the question of what being human means.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
There'll be a lot of questions on this film, obviously, but we're all hungry at this time for food. If there are questions.
I'm going to share my article with you. So
yes,
if you
please.
Still like
yes, please.
If you like go through it, I'm like
yes,
more than happy to get your reactions. To get
sure,
your,
sure.
Right?
It'll be my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to share it with you.
Thank you. Ci sono domande?
So, no question from the students, but I mean, we're going to meet again on Wednesday, so they can think about it. If they want to know something more, they will ask.
Yes, yes. Sure. Okay, I think that we can thank our guest. And again, we're sorry that you're not with us, but you gave us still the talks, and the lectures you gave were quite interesting and stimulating. The students take time. Maybe at the end, they will sort of come out and ask questions. That's why we believe that it's better in presence, because, you know, you get more involved. But anyway, there were many students present, and so thank you for now. And we're meeting again on Wednesday. You can have the virtual tour of our cities.
Okay, thank you very much again for this welcoming session. I mean, I have felt like through and through from all of you guys. I really feel at home with you. Thank you very much. And I'm gonna share this article with you through email.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay.
And see you. Take care.
Thank you. See you.
A presto. Grazie a tutti.
Bye, thank you.
Grazie ai tecnici. E ci vediamo mercoledì con il programma.
Grazie proprio.
Grazie, arrivederci. Arrivederci. See you. Now we can meet again. Now that we know that we can meet on, you know, yes. We can discuss. So we can
certainly we need to do that.
Yes, in the future we know how. If we can't, you know, if something happens, trains, planes, COVID, we can always meet and share our ideas. So this is positive. This is positive.
Yes,
so
yes,
thank you very much for now. Bye. Bye.
Okay.
Ciao.